All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of the Single Parent Daily Podcast with your hosts,
Chady Dunmore.
and I think I'm Evan DeMarco. It's been a rough couple of weeks here in Northern California, so I'm having some mental issues.
Yeah.
There's a
Sorry
lot.
about that.
There's a lot of ash on the brain.
It's the environmental issues are horrible. My allergies are like at its worst.
Yeah. And here's the worst part, right? Like our next guest is in Northern California as well. So we're all paying taxes, California taxes, to not be able to breathe.
I know.
I don't know. It's rough. But maybe there's some things that we can do about that. And diet augmentation, especially with our kids, is something that I think that we can do to really start focusing on a lot of these systemic inflammation issues that we see, asthma, metabolic diseases. One of the things that was really fascinating is I saw a research study that showed that T cell production for kids that are obese consistently declines throughout age. And so as we talk about T cells, memory cells being able to, fight off infections like COVID and other things, diet right now is more essential than ever. Yeah. So very excited to have, do we call you doctor?
I think we should. She worked really hard to get that. I'm going to call her doctor.
Okay.
Call me doctor once and then switch to Emily. How's that?
Okay. So we have Dr. Emily Ventura in the house.
Hey.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun.
Thank you for taking the time. So we're going to talk a lot about your book, Sugarproof. And let me tell you a quick story about this one. So you sent us this book, and this book showed up on my doorstep as my ex-wife was dropping off my daughter. And she's like, what is this? And so I couldn't wait to just, like I saw your name on it. Like I couldn't wait to open it because we have a lot of conversations about sugar and sugar being the enemy.
So when it was delivered, was it revealed Sugarproof?
Oh, no, I ripped it. I ripped the whole thing open in front of my ex-wife. I'm like, look at what we're going to be reading. So we're going to talk a lot about your book. But before we do that, I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience and kind of talk a little bit about how you ended up getting to the point where you wrote this book.
Sounds good. It's hard to know where to start, I guess because this is a podcast about parenting and also single parenting. I'll try and start, I guess, back from when I got married, just so you have a little bit of a glimpse into that too. I'm from Oakland, and I actually met my late husband. I'm a widow now, but I met him when I was 17, when I was still a senior in high school. I met him at Cafe Strada in Berkeley. And then went away to college in New York to Cornell, but I had this long distance relationship for that whole time. And then when I graduated, we got married. So we got married really young. And then we moved around quite a bit for his work, and then also for both of us to do school, grad school, just a lot of different moves to different places, and wound up in LA for about 10 years, which is where the journey with Sugarproof really started. I wrote this with Dr. Michael Goran, who was my mentor from my master's and PhD programs at USC. So that's where I met Michael, and I did a lot of the research, helped with a lot of the research that is discussed in this book during those years. And then the parenting journey started a little bit later. So I was, after I graduated, I applied for a Fulbright in Italy, and my husband quit his job and we moved to Italy. We spent 9 months there, and that was great. I taught at a university. I taught public health nutrition and did some research, and we really fell in love with Italy. And at the same time, we wanted to have a family. So we thought, well, actually this would be a great place, for me to take like a little maternity leave and us to try and stay. So he got a job there, and we became dual citizens. Moved back for a short amount of time, and I was working in research at UCLA in a hospital basement, and I was pregnant, and I was going to be given 6 weeks of maternity leave. So I thought, I don't think this is going to work. Even more reason to go back to Italy. So we made it work. We went back to Italy. My husband took that job, and I had my first child in Los Angeles 3 months before we moved. So we moved to Italy when he was 3 months old. And then we had my second in Bologna.
Nice.
So so I did my first stage of parenting in Italy.
I can just tell you're a brave woman. Like all I could think about is like,
she's so smart.
She's a badass, but I'm like, I keep thinking about flying to Italy with a 3-month-old, and my hackles is like, nah, like it's just.
Yeah, it's all relative. Somehow that seemed easier than quitting this prestigious job that I had and still being in the area. It's easier if you say, sorry, I can't do this because I'm leaving, right? Than to say like, actually, I just think this policy is crazy and I'm,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
Well,
very
and don't get me wrong. I would have easily made the flight to Italy, but I'm still like, woo, that's ballsy.
PTSD being a dad sometimes still.
I no, see, the thing is, the very first flight my daughter went on, second flight was just her and I. She was 7 months old, 8 months old, and I took her on a red eye to Florida. And my ex-wife was already there for work, so we were going to meet up and spend some time. So I just
What
remember
airline, may I ask?
Delta.
Okay.
Of course, I only fly Delta.
I mean, some people could rough it out on a Southwest all the way to the East
Oh,
Coast.
hell no. Southwest. You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. Anyway, sorry, please, Dr. Emily, continue.
I'm trying to get to the point here, but basically, we were in Italy, then we moved to the UK for his work, and then he died. My husband died in a motorcycle accident, completely, of course, unexpectedly. And at the time, my kids were really young. My youngest was 2, and my eldest was 5.
Wow. That's very
so
young.
there I was in the UK with my 2 boys and no family around. And right before that, Michael and I had been working on various book proposals during that time. And the second time around, our second real iteration of the book got picked up by Penguin Random House, the Avery division, and we got this book deal. And that was right before the accident. So I got the book deal, and then my husband died. And then I had to decide, okay, do I want to stay here and try and write this, or do I want to move back, or what do I want to do, and how am I going to do this, right? So I'm sure, I think all of us that are single parents have gone through all these different things of, grief and self-discovery and suddenly having to rearrange and learn new skills and just figure things out on the fly, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely the journey of the single parent, and how you end up as a single parent, I think, is different for everybody. But I want to, before we kind of get back into the book and your whole journey, I'd like to take a minute just to kind of revisit your husband, and what is that like, right? We've had a couple people on the show who whose spouses have died, and that's how they've ended up as single parents. But I really want to touch on this because there's really this interesting concept of, when we get divorced, it's kind of like a death, but then we see that person all the time, which can be as equally traumatic as someone dying. But you're in a foreign country, you've got 2 young kids. Like, how do you even begin to try to move forward?
I don't know.
She just had no choice. I think she just was like, and probably,
yeah.
I think as a mother, I would probably be like, you're numb. I think I've had an ex-boyfriend pass away, and I wasn't even married to him, and nor did I have kids with him. But when you're connected with someone, you become so numb. Even when my dad passed away 2 years ago, I think I started grieving years after, like really grieving, where like everything that reminded me of the person, was like,
right.
Yeah,
and it's not linear at all. You might be like slowly making progress, in the positive direction, but there's these triggers and things come back and you think you're doing great and then all of a sudden you're not. It's tough. And I think, grief for all of us is just take on so many different forms. And, whether you lost your spouse and they're physically gone, or you lost that relationship with them, or, you lost that partnership, I think all of us have experienced some form of grief through this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's, that is such a traumatic experience. How did, at 2 and 5, how did your kids react?
It was really confusing. I think one of the most confusing things was that he travels quite often for his job. So sometimes we wouldn't see him for weeks at a time. And so the kids were sort of used to that. So I think it took even longer in their case to realize, oh, wow, like he's actually really not coming back. Like we're not going to see him again. So yeah, it was horrendous, honestly. And
how long ago was this?
Suddenly too, because you don't expect any of this. So you have to make a lot of parenting decisions really quickly about really major topics. It's hard.
Yeah.
but we got through it. Still getting through it, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, it's forever something that you have to get through. I was going to ask, how long ago was this?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah, that's still very new. Still very,
Right.
very new. As of now that you stopped in your story because I want to catch up because we interrupted. You were deciding if you're going to move back or not with your kids.
So I decided to stay. At least I stayed for about 2 years after. And it was good for me just to have that stability of being in the same place, you know, and not having to make another transition, and letting my kids stay. My youngest was in nursery, so he stayed in nursery, and my eldest was able to stay at the same primary school that he had, was just starting the primary school, but so he went there. But it was, you know, it was sort of like continuing on the plan that they knew they were going to be on, and not having another major change. Mm-hmm. So that was great. And, you know, I was in a small town in England that I still really like. I actually might go back. I came back, pandemic related reasons, largely came back. I just got tired of being isolated without family there during the pandemic. So we came back to the Monterey Bay area where my parents are in June.
So that was right at the beginning of COVID?
Kind of mid, yeah. It was, let's see, I guess lockdown started around March there. And by June, I had it. I was ready to come back.
Jeez.
You've
had, I mean, we've all had a shit show of a couple of years, but.
Yeah, it's true.
She definitely takes the cake, though. She definitely has gone through. You are a soldier. So Sugarproof, get to how Sugarproof has evolved into the book that it is now.
Well, the book, you know, it's a combination of Michael. So Michael is a professor of pediatrics at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and USC, and he spent over 35 years doing research looking at the different factors that are involved in metabolic disease and other health outcomes for children, and all the different, you know, ways that nutrition play into that. And you know, as I said, I worked in his lab for a number of years, and I also worked as a community nutrition educator. And, you know, I'm a mom, he's a dad, he has 2 teenage daughters. And so we just kind of wanted to put everything into one place, not only in terms of the science, but also a lot of the practical tips that we've learned along the way from working with families in different, you know, settings, community settings, research settings, and then also in our own families as well.
So let's dive into this, because I think that there's definitely a lot that we can uncover in the book, but I want to talk about the science and then get into the practical applications. So I think by and large, we think that sugar is bad, but is there, actually, let's talk about the science. Why is sugar bad? And, you know, what are we really seeing from a long-term epidemiological standpoint on what this is doing to kids?
Well, first I have to say that, you know, we're not trying to fully demonize sugar. We don't take a restrictive approach that says that you should put your children on any kind of like a no sugar diet for long term, or try and completely take it out of your family, you know, family's eating habits. The thing is that, you know, we've already known for quite a long time that the amount of sugar in our diets has been increasing steadily. And a lot of this has to do with processed foods. So 70% of processed foods and 80% of snacks marketed to children have some form of added sugar in them. So, you know, this isn't just a sugar issue, it's also like a larger processed food kind of issue. And, you know, the book talks a lot about not just what to take out, but, you know, ways to sort of displace these processed sugar-laden foods with healthier things. And then, you know, that way you're kind of focusing more on a positive. But, you know, going back to the sugar issue, what's interesting is that the shifts that we've seen in our food supply over the last, you know, 100 years, even sugar has morphed. So, you know, it used to be more just sucrose, and now we're seeing all these other sugars in our food supply. And the one that we're most concerned about is fructose. So sucrose is half glucose and half fructose, but there's a lot of sugars now on the market and used in different products that are a lot higher concentration of fructose. So, you know, the classic one is high fructose corn syrup.
But now, Just to interrupt, I definitely want to differentiate that because, straight fructose would be something that, if you look at commercial supplies of straight fructose, which, could be a dextrose base, that could come from strawberries. So you could have a very organic source of that versus the high fructose corn syrup. So how are you guys differentiating those from a health perspective?
That's a great question.
It is a good question. So interestingly, some of these fruit sugars that sound healthier than high fructose corn syrup actually have a higher percentage of fructose. So things like fruit juice concentrates or evaporated grape juice can be higher in fructose than high fructose corn syrup. They may have, less like chemical contamination because, depending on the process that they're made with, but really the take-home message here is that our kids are getting too much fructose, and in the form of juice or in the form of these different concentrates. It can even be in the form of sucrose because half of sucrose is fructose. But there's been just so many shifts in the food supply, and those are causing problems that we didn't see before. So we're having problems with like fructose malabsorption, and a lot more kids having stomach aches and then digestive problems. There's a silent epidemic of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease now, which, that you don't really see signs of that until it's in an advanced state.
And
So
especially in kids, right? Like
Right.
the origins of that, at 10, 15, 20 years old is almost unheard of, except in the last, generation.
Right. Yeah. So there's that. And then, then there's all these like different alternatives on the market that a lot of parents are really confused about, and rightly so, like stevia and monk fruit and, all these sugar alcohols that are being used in some of these health products. And those are confusing as well. So we go through all of those in the book and try and explain what they are and, give our recommendations on, I'll just be straight about it. We don't recommend any of those because.
Really?
Interesting.
I mean, sugar alcohol,
And
I
I
get.
thought monk fruit was good. And
Yeah. I mean, sugar alcohol, I get. Every time I do it, it makes me poop. Not in a good way.
It's like it's supposed to be added in a lot of like diabetes food, but also too, it's like the sugar-free syrup, like, and you're thinking like, oh, I'm gonna put this on my protein pancake. It's sugar-free, but it has those sugar alcohols or those fake like sugars that actually it's like tricking your body to think that it's tasting like sugar, but it's actually doing worse, right? Can you explain
Right.
that?
You've got it. Yeah, interestingly, a lot of these can elicit an insulin response because your body thinks that it's had sugar, and so it compensates, and your insulin rises, and then you get hungry.
Yeah, which
It
is
just
the
sort of
ghrelin.
fuels hunger, which is why we see all these studies that show that, associations between things like drinking diet soda and being overweight.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the hypotheses for why we see that.
Which leads to insulin resistance, which then leads to metabolic inflexibility.
Explain metabolic inflexibility.
You know what? I did at this retreat in Costa Rica about a year and a half ago. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
We'll talk about that later. But I think insulin, if you look at, mitochondrial dysfunction and metabolic inflexibility, a big part of that is insulin resistance. And we see that more and more as typical of the Western American diet. Which is not just the sugar, but then it's also the linoleic acid. So we see the omega-6, omega-3 ratios all out of whack. So, but this is not my speech. This is Dr. Emily. So I want to get in. So you guys are actually looking at it from the standpoint of stevia, monk fruit, some of these natural non-caloric sweeteners still having an impact on insulin resistance or an insulin reaction to that. And then subsequently, we're still seeing some of the negative impacts, even though it's not technically a sugar.
Right. And it's, really what it is a big unknown. So because we don't have, long-term studies that show, what the effects could be if you start having these products at a young age, what's going to happen in 30, 40 years, we just don't know. So we're not really comfortable recommending them. What we do know is that they can ramp up your sweet taste preference. So they can be up to like 20,000 times sweeter than sugar. And so the more of those that you have, the more you reinforce your need for sweets and your predisposition to want them. And so, yeah, we just think that's better to skip that whole genre of sweeteners entirely.
So I didn't get a chance to read the entire book. I kind of got a cursory glance at it, but I love some of the content that you're talking here. But let's run through what in your mind, your and Michael's mind would be like a great daily meal segment or meal plan for a kid. And we can get into the 7 and 21 day challenges, but how do I remember waking up and the first thing that I did was go for the giant bowl of Captain Crunch. And then it was like, I would just eat all day long. Clearly that wasn't healthy. And luckily genetics, I think, kind of helped me out along the way. But how do we migrate away from the typical, like
Pop-Tarts?
Yeah. Like the typical
waffles,
kid's diet into something that is healthy?
Right. It's hard. I'm glad you mentioned breakfast, because that's where I would have started to talking about this. And, I do want to say that we're not prescribing one particular approach to eating, in terms of specifics, just because, so many families are doing different things, which is fine. So vegan families, vegetarian families, families that lean more toward paleo. And, you can do what we're suggesting with any of those approaches. But definitely starting at breakfast is important. We talk about the sugar roller coaster. So if you start the morning off with a sweet breakfast, sometimes that just leads to this like all day long ride of highs and lows and highs and lows. And it's really hard to recover from that. And I know it as a parent too. What's confusing is that you can be on that roller coaster and not eat Captain Crunch, right? So looking back on my 20s, I was on that roller coaster for years. And I was having stuff like, Kashi Go Lean cereal and soy milk, and I was on the roller coaster, right? So everybody's different, I think, in terms of what they can handle. I know I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and so I can't, there's no way.
And it's PCOS month, isn't it?
Is it? I didn't realize that.
Yes, today, this is National PCOS Awareness Month.
Wow, cool. Okay.
Why am I the only one as the testicles in the conversation who knows that?
Isn't it Suicide Awareness Month too? I think
we have a month for everything.
Yeah,
It's
that's interesting. So you mentioned.
So I'm on a tangent here, but yeah. So anything
you said polycystic ovarian, how is that correlated? Because a lot of women suffer from a lot of cysts and like endometriosis and so on. So I'd love to hear your feedback on how you would feel like with sugar kind of induces that.
Right. So it gives you a predisposition to have a higher insulin response and to have, more risk for prediabetes and diabetes. And so I just react probably more than the normal person to refined carbohydrates and sugar, which, finally I figured that out and I started eating lower on the glycemic index, and it was so much better. I never have those blood sugar emergencies like I used to have. But whether you're a child or an adult and you have, one thing or the other, I think everybody can really benefit from a breakfast that is lower on the glycemic index. So we suggest a lot of different tips to do that with your kids.
So one question I have on that note then is, we have seen through Walter Longo's research on intermittent fasting and preventing or even curing type 2 diabetes. Is there any research that you guys have done on intermittent fasting with kids, and is that something that anyone should consider? I've had this question asked of me, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, I intermittent fast, but I'm not going to tell my daughter she can't eat until noon.
Right. It's a tricky one. We don't suggest anything extreme like that for kids. I know Michael's involved in some new research studies that are looking into those effects because, it's something that we want to know. But, I was just having the thought yesterday, actually, that a lot of kids sort of almost do it anyway because they eat dinner at 5. And now that I eat with my kids, I eat dinner at 5 oftentimes, and then I'm not eating again until breakfast the next day a lot of times. So that's a pretty good window.
Yeah. A lot of kids are doing, I remember I always ate breakfast, but I noticed that my daughter, she just started high school and she's not a big breakfast eater. And if she does, it's like usually a smoothie. She'll have vegan protein powder with the banana. She's like really good. She's better than me, but she won't eat lunch or throughout the day. And then she comes home and eats, whether if it's after 1 or 2, and then dinner. And she's not much of an eater like me, but it seems like some kids do it naturally.
I was a conehead, just put a vacuum tube in my mouth and I ate everything.
I know. I was like a teenage growing boy too.
I still am. The only problem is I don't grow up anymore. If I eat too much, I just grow out.
So give us an example of because fruits are not bad and you're not saying that sugar is bad, but it's the hidden marketing of this is supposed to be sugar free, or this is supposed to be really healthy for you.
Mhm.
What's your take on like Jamba juices, or like
Yeah.
what is your?
That's a liquid Snickers bar.
I know.
Yeah. So, we just did a post on our Instagram account yesterday. If anyone wants to follow, it's Sugarproof Kids, about smoothies. And the thing about smoothies is oftentimes they're juice based. So the base of it is fruit juice concentrate or fruit juice of some sort. And so it's giving you a lot of sugar without the fiber that would have naturally come with that fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big dose of fructose that the body really doesn't know how to handle. And especially kids just are not equipped. They don't have the transporters to deal with all of that fructose in their tummies. And it can cause a lot of, gastrointestinal effects, but also, long-term, if you're having those regularly, it can start to cause other problems as well.
Yeah, because my daughter, like, she likes to make her own smoothies. She
Mhm.
loves smoothies, and in the grocery store they have like these juice packets, like it's like a Jamba Juice, and I'm like, no, don't. Let's just make our own.
Right.
Or they
Thinking
try to make the
of,
acai bowls and so on.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that you're saying this out loud, because now I have proof.
Well, this actually comes back to the marketing question that I wanted to ask you is how do we really work with our kids to educate them? Jamba Juice, acai bowls, all of these things which are ridiculously unhealthy. The sugar content is insane. I think like one of those giant Jamba Juices can be like 2,100 calories. It's
And then
something insane.
the granola is like added on.
Yeah,
That's like,
granola
because
is another sneaky one for sure.
mhm.
But
And
you,
there's
you can have all these things. It's just, it's a matter of like maybe sharing them with somebody or making them yourself, or, just getting around it somehow and not having that huge dose of it all at
But
once.
to that extent, what we perceive to be healthy and what is actually healthy are two different things. So how do you guys in your families really go about re-educating your kids to, show them that what is actually healthy and what, the rest of the world is saying are two completely different things?
Right. Well, my 8-year-old now, he just turned 8 a few weeks ago. He likes to read labels. So he actually really enjoys that now. He likes to take a look at products himself. And then, my younger one, he likes to talk about it some, but more my strategy with him is just getting him involved in the kitchen. That's been, and with both of them, that's been really helpful for all of us.
So what are they eating for breakfast? I'd like to know.
What do they eat for breakfast? It
Yeah.
depends on the day. This morning, actually, we were kind of rushed, and both of them wanted a quesadilla on a corn tortilla with black beans in it.
That sounds really good.
That's
I'm hungry.
that's a really quick one. And I'll just try and push them more in the savory direction as much as I can, just because, even if I let them have something like a Cheerios that doesn't, has just a couple grams of sugar per serving, what I realize is they're really hungry like an hour after. And it just leads to this like, oh, another bowl of cereal. And then they're still hungry. And then it's like, okay, what's the next snack? And especially since they're doing learning at home now, it's really hard to manage that because they're right near the kitchen. It's just like, I don't know if you guys have gone through that too, but it's just like snack after snack after snack. And
it seems like they only want snacks.
Right. Yeah, I love snacking, and and that's okay. But I realize if I make them some scrambled eggs with spinach, or my youngest really likes smoked salmon on whole grain toast.
Oh wow!
Then I like smoked salmon. I love it.
I love it. That's what I had today, actually. Then then he doesn't ask for as much, at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Things are easier for us.
Do your kids have a sweet tooth? I'm a savory. My daughter has a sweet tooth. Obviously, she's like smoothie girl, but she's actually really good with whole ingredients. So she doesn't use like the fake products or juice. She's never drank juice. She's just, pretty healthy, but she does have a sweet tooth.
Mm-hmm.
So I never like was into cookies, or, I mean, I ate it, but my mom was just, I don't know. She's very strategic. She always had fruits around, and I always just ate that. But do your kids have a sweet tooth, and do you struggle with that? Because it sounds like they eat pretty healthy, and it seems like one of them is really into ingredients. So that means that he knows mommy's into ingredients too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I'm trying to think if I think one of them has more of a sweet tooth than the other. Mine are pretty, mine like treats, and we're fine with treats. We just sort of follow this like one treat at max a day rule. I mean, it's a loose rule. I don't want to say it's like, but they do really well with that. So it gives them sort of more agency to be able to choose. And so, if they say, hey, Mom, can we have, after lunch, can we have a cookie or whatever?
Yeah.
Oftentimes what we have in my house anyway are like the treats from the book. So, I don't have to really worry about it. But if we're out and they see something they want, or if they're offered something somewhere, and I always want them to feel like they can.
Yeah.
But if it's like, oh, so-and-so is offering me a cookie, but wait, we've just been to another thing I also had one, or, earlier today there was something else, then I'll say, well, we kind of already had a treat today. What do you think about saving that for another day? Or I'll just give them the choice entirely and say, okay, well, would you rather have this, or would you rather have this?
Yeah. Give them an option. What do you do with your daughter? Do you give her an option? Because my daughter's not allowed to have soda at all. So now their kids are like in high school, they have soda, and she's tried it and she just doesn't like it. And I've also, as a nutritionist, I've exposed that lifestyle to her, what's good and bad. But
I'm guilty, and at a certain point, this podcast, if my daughter ever listens to it, is going to cause an insane therapy bill. But I've gone a little overboard and told her that soda will kill her. Which it will. I'm
the same way. I'm pretty bad. I'm like, soda's the worst thing ever.
No, I mean, like I told her if she drinks one, she might die.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
But look, here's a problem. Like peer pressure, the schools that we go to, like the way that people are feeding their kids, there's a reason why. And I don't want to get into the politics of this, but I think that there's a reason why the death rate in America is so high, and for COVID, and that's because of the way that we eat, the way that our immune systems respond. And it's like one soda, it's you don't just stop at one. Like, you will crave that. And I think you talk about in the book, and as we've talked about here, is like people will start to crave that. So yeah, that's been a big one. The problem that I struggle with is snacks. And I feel like snacks are the modern day version of what my parents used to call the go out and play. When they didn't want to deal with me as a kid, it was like, just go outside. Now parents, when they don't want to deal with their kid or they're busy, it's like, just go have a snack. And so I feel guilty of this, and I would love to talk about some tips and tricks to kind of reset that behavior, where I, unfortunately, as being a busy single parent, have used snacks as a distraction so that I could get work done. And in the age of COVID and distance learning, there's a lot of snacking that goes on, and it's like in between each class, she's like, can I have a snack? Can I have a snack? And I'm like,
I'm guilty.
Yeah. And I've tried to migrate towards some healthier things, but ultimately understanding that, I want to reset the behavior, not just of the snacking, but of the things that we're eating. We've got her on carrots and peanut butter, but Emily, talk a little bit about that. Like, what are your kind of go-tos for resetting some of this behavior?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll just sometimes ask a question like, are you sure you need a snack? Kind of, we already had one. I'm trying to sort of also build in a little bit more of a routine, because at school they had one, right? So it's, more like, okay, we'll have breakfast, we'll do school for a little while. You want a morning snack? Let's have one snack. Let's put it on a plate. Let's sit at the table while you have your 10-minute break and eat it and focus on that. And then we'll get back to what we're doing. And that sort of helps give things more of a structure. And then just in general, having things that are actually adding value to their overall diet is helpful. So not
what are
just
your go-tos?
filler snacks. Well, my youngest is really into Persian cucumbers right now, which are so easy because they, he'll eat the peel on regular cucumbers too, but these ones are even more appealing to just eat peeling. Sorry, it's a bad pun, but yeah. He'll eat these Persian cucumbers and maybe some roasted almonds. My kids like the chickpea snacks from the book a lot. They never get tired of those because you can keep putting different seasonings on them. So they like a garam masala version of these roasted chickpeas. That's
your kids are awesome.
I mean, and they eat regular, like, have some like string cheeses around or things like that as well.
My daughter's like, can I have a corn dog?
Oh man. Well, my boyfriend and I just we were quarantined together, and he has a now it's well soon to be 8 years old, and a 10-year-old boy, and then I have a 14-year-old daughter. And the back and forth, I have my daughter a lot more, so I get to and implement healthier habits with her. So she eats like pokey, she's super healthy. Her smoothies are like really healthy, and she'll put vegan powder in there to get her protein. Like she's on point. His kids, you know, their mom is, they just have a different diet. They have a lot of snacks, and it's like cereals and so on. And so for me, I would love advice besides the book and stuff. What are ways on to bring in healthier habits for a child who has, you know, sodas involved and Pringles and, you know, the yogurts that have M&Ms and Oreos and stuff. And so for me, I don't want to like take that away from them, but I definitely want to implement the fact that sometimes like I'll get a lot of fruit in the house and I'll cut it up and I make it available. So they love that. And so, and then I noticed that when I have it available for them, or when I'm making my own quesadillas for them and so on, they'll eat it. Versus, but you know, he's busy, I'm busy sometimes, and sometimes, you know, the frozen food is, or the Pringles are in the pantry, and they're like, and they're hungry, they want to eat right now. You know, they can't wait. They're dying. And so as parents, you
because they're
know,
sugar crashing.
yeah. And so as parents, how can we, you know, how can we ease our way into it where it's not like I'm the bad person?
It's hard. I mean, I think definitely a first step would be to focus on the beverages, because the liquid sugar, the research shows that's really the most harmful. So just trying to get the sweet drinks, don't bring them in the house in the first place, you know, sodas and sports drinks and things like that. And then you can make things available, like, you know, some of these sparkling waters that are flavored are great, that don't have any sugar or sweeteners in them. And my kids really like those, and they like to pick out their own flavors. So I think the more that it's not necessarily like fully imposed, it's more like, okay, I'd like for us to try some of these waters.
Yeah.
What are the flavors, or come to the store with me and let's pick them out together, and which one looks best to you.
Yeah.
So they feel like they had some sort of a say in it,
Yeah,
or, you know, hey, I'd love to find an alternative to these Pringles. Like, this is the range of options. Like, how about some popcorn, or how about some roasted nuts, or how about some sunflower seeds? They have a tamari roasted sunflower seed recipe in the book.
Yeah.
That's really good. Or you could do it with pumpkin seeds.
Yeah, because we can go to the pumpkin farm, because now Apple Hill's open. So
there we go.
Yeah, I can totally do that.
Mask up and go pick a pumpkin and then throw some seeds.
Because when the Pringles are, you know, I'm guilty of eating them too, and Doritos, they're like the worst. And my boyfriend's
cabbage. Sorry.
What was that, cabbage?
Yeah, this is kind of funny, but we have a roasted red cabbage recipe.
Okay.
That it's not potato chips, but they're really good. Surprisingly, like, yeah, I was surprised. I am surprised still how much my kids like those. And they're, you know, it's like with olive oil and sea salt, you sort of almost get that chip feeling. Not like kale chips, but something different. Try those.
I'll try that too.
So Emily, you guys did a ton of research on this book. Not only do you have the science, you have the recipes, you kind of have the challenges, which I think are really going to be intriguing for a lot of families. But what are some things outside of sugar that, you know, we really need to be aware of as we look at more the long-term health of not just our kids, but our entire families?
Well, you know, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but I've been thinking a lot about food as love and food as a social act. And I think that in eating, you know, and I think, you know, when you go through the loss of a partner at first, I know for me, like, I love to cook and I love to eat, and I didn't want to do that for a while. You know, I was just like, took me a couple months to want to get back to that. Even for somebody like me that likes to cook. But I think, you know, thinking about as you're moving on and from this traumatic event of a divorce or loss of a spouse, it really is a form of self-love that you know, cooking for yourself, even if you're not sharing that with a partner, or cooking for your children as an extension of your love for yourself and your love for them, right? So I think, you know, and giving kids sort of that same type of framework so that they understand that, you know, this is important. This is something, it doesn't have to be gourmet, but, you know, this is something that matters. This is like a life skill, you know, learning how to eat well and learning how to share that with loved ones, and just the experience of sitting down together, I think is really important.
So I'm glad you brought that up. That's kind of where I was heading with all of this. And I think right now, single parents, married people, whatever, um, there's a real problem. And because of Corona, I mean, I'll tell you this, my most intimate relationship over the last 6 months has been with my Uber Eats driver. Um, and that's not really true, but it sounded funny in my head. It's, we've forgotten what the intimacy of food is like and how to share that with our kids. And so I love that suggestion of bringing the kids into the kitchen, and really planning things out. And I think another challenge that we're facing too is people are afraid to go shopping. So how are, any tips or tricks in the age of COVID as far as overcoming some of the concerns that people have just going out in public and acquiring food to bring back and cook?
Yeah. Well, I think using your freezer even more can be helpful for certain things. I was kind of laughing to myself because since my kids were raised at first in Bologna, it's an emergency if we don't have ragu in the freezer. So, whatever your version of ragu is, for us, we always have little containers of ragu, and we have, either with pasta or polenta or like zucchini noodles or something. And I'll make a big pot of that every once in a while and I freeze it. If you're in Bologna, you usually have a mom that does that for you. But, as a single parent, sometimes you have to be your own like nonna. You gotta just make some stuff and freeze it. Sometimes you could do that with dal or, any kind of a healthy recipe that you can make in a big batch and freeze. Or always having some frozen vegetables on hand is helpful, like peas can be good, or green beans or spinach, or, just so that if you didn't get to the store, then you can still have some vegetables for the kids and for you.
That's a good one. So
Yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about your time across the pond here. Is, we look at especially some of those areas in Italy as blue zones. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, we've got a high concentration of bread, pastas, things like that. So how is it that these complex carbohydrates, which, they're still sugars, can be so healthy in a certain region, but yet here in the U.S., they've really become demonized, and whether that's keto or Atkins or whatever that is, how in your experience have you been able to kind of reconcile what we're seeing legitimately in Europe versus what we see here in the U.S.?
Well, it's interesting because pasta plays a certain role in a meal, but it's oftentimes a smaller portion of it than you might see on a plate in the States, especially if it's something that's been ordered at a restaurant. I mean, I see the portions and I'm just thinking that looks like for like a family-sized platter, right? So if you're sitting down for a proper lunch or dinner in Italy where all the courses are served, the pasta is the primo. So it's like it's a smaller version of pasta, and then there's a secondo that's a protein, and then there's a contorno, which is a very large portion of vegetables. So it's not just like, big plate of pasta with one little floret of broccoli on the side. It's like a whole plate of the vegetables. So the overall glycemic load is, an index is lower because it's balanced with the protein that's in that second course. Or some people will kind of split those two things into two meals, like on a work day or a weekday. So they might have the pasta course at lunch, and then at dinner time they might have the secondo. So they might have the protein with the vegetable at dinner, or a salad or whatever. So yeah, I think there's just different ways that
Portion control,
more balanced.
Portion control is everything. When I started doing bodybuilding, I learned that brown rice and white rice is the same in the glycemic index. Mm-hmm. And I used to always think, oh, I can't have white rice. And it had nothing to do with that. It was just the portion control. And the brown rice just makes you fuller because of the fiber. Mm-hmm. And so
also has more arsenic, but that's,
that.
But hey, who's counting?
And the glycemic index, that's what I'm just saying as far as people comparing the two. And that, I think, portion control is everything. At the end of the day, I think, when it comes to nutrition, I think a lot of people are unaware of, besides ingredients, is portion control just plays a huge role in people's diets and losing weight. Because, when I teach people how to lose weight, I always tell them to start off with a macronutrient diet based on, that way they still have a good relationship with food, and they don't develop, eating disorder, or they start binging and so on. But a lot of it has to do with ingredients and cooking your own food, because I'm not a sweet tooth eater, but having, learning how to cook your own pecan pie and you realize how much sugar is in it, I
Right.
stopped eating it
Mhm.
because I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize how much sugar is in that. And
Yeah.
I think, you saying that is a huge role in like showing people cooking your own food is going to make a huge difference in realizing what's in your food and what you're consuming and
Right.
why your health is the way it is. I mean,
Yeah. And I also just want to acknowledge that that might be really tough for some people, especially if you've lost the partner that used to be the one that did that more, right? So this might be like an entirely new skill for you to have to do on your own now as a single parent. So it doesn't have to be complicated. We're not talking about like pulling off 5-star meals every night. But just really simple meals. We have a lot of recipes in our book that fit that category. I like interchangeable things, so things that you can make like at dinner and then eat again at breakfast, or put in a packed lunch for your kids just to save time.
I'd like to know, what would you do for interchangeable, like something for dinner and then cook at breakfast?
Like a frittata is a really good one.
Yeah.
If you make it, I'm open to
Making me
eating really.
hungry.
I know.
I'll eat like leftover Thai food at breakfast, and sometimes my kids do too. So, we have a recipe for turmeric veggie fried rice that's pretty adaptable. Or we have these crepes that are so easy. They're called 3-2-1 crepes, and it's just 3 cups of 3 eggs, 2 cups of milk, and 1 cup of flour. And you can make them savory. You can make them the night before, and then you can reheat them in the morning and have them savory, or have them with fruit, or put them in the packed lunch.
I love that.
You know what? I'm gonna finish the book over the weekend.
Me too. I got
So-
the PDF format.
There's so much here, and I think you've really spoken to single parents, right? There's so many challenges that we face as single parents, whether that's we don't have the time to cook, we don't have the skill set. We interviewed a guy a couple months ago on Single Parents Daily, who, his wife did all of the cooking, and like when he got divorced, he was lost. Like he was actually calling friends. He's like, how do I make sandwiches? And so there's so many tips, there's so many tools in the toolbox out there, and this Sugarproof is a great opportunity for any parent to sharpen their skill set on simple things like, how do we keep ourselves healthy, how do we keep our kids healthy, but more importantly, how do we model the behavior, right? And I think that that's one of the things that is lacking. We see a lot of parents that will make one thing for their kid and one thing for themselves because the kid is such a picky eater. And I think that there's nothing wrong with saying, like, if your kid doesn't eat for 2 days because he refuses to, eat what you're eating, eventually he'll eat what you eat, and he's not going to die.
Right.
And I'm sure that there's some better information in Sugarproof, versus following my advice right there on how to transition.
Mike, Evan's starving. He's like, you're going to eat this and you're going to like it.
Yeah.
We're all like, huh?
Like, put that kale in your mouth now. But
Definitely you're not eating kale. I know you're eating like top-notch sushi. You eat really healthy.
But interestingly enough, and I think a lot of parents can probably agree with this, is the age of COVID has really changed how we eat.
Yeah.
And it's, we do eat by Uber Eats a lot more. We are, I'm not going to the farmer's market like I used to, where I'm getting a lot of those fresh fruits and vegetables. So there's something to be taken away from that is that we don't necessarily have to have access to the same resources, but we can still provide the same nutritional value that's lacking. And I think, look, let's be honest, ADHD is a direct result of diet. I'll get doctors that argue with me all day long on that one, but I think that that's a direct result of diet, and that's excess sugar. So have you guys done any research on that one, by the way?
No, I haven't been involved in any research with ADHD, but we do summarize some of it in the book.
Okay.
We talk about it. Yeah.
Any thoughts on it?
It's really hard to say. I mean, I don't think there's enough evidence to say that sugar causes it. There's probably some evidence to suggest that it might aggravate it. But there are these large-scale studies that look at the overall dietary quality and things that are more like, the more like standard American diet type of, associated with that, whereas more traditional diets, with more omega-3s and healthier nutrient composition have been protective. So
yeah,
it's hard to say.
there's a pharmaceutical company called Enzymatech that did a clinical research study, and what they found was that kids who typically presented with symptoms of ADHD had a lack of polyunsaturated fatty acids in their diet. And so simply by augmenting the diet with polyunsaturated fatty acids, but enzymatically binding those with phospholipids, so as better bioavailability, had a significant impact on ADHD symptoms. So I think that, we're not Mediterranean diet here in the US. We don't have access to those, those PUFAs. Our omega-6 to omega-3 ratios are completely out of whack. And most of that's the snacks, right? Like it's sugar and it's linoleic acid. It's all the garbage that our kids are eating. Yeah. So you guys really sound like you just advocate for a return to basics. Like, let's just eat sensibly, right?
Right. Yeah, definite basics. Doesn't have to be fancy. Yeah.
It's like a really easy to read book too, which I really like. And the fact that, not everyone is super keen on the language that you just said right now as far as poly. But
I come with an interpreter.
Yeah, I'm all like, what did you just say?
An HR rep and an interpreter. So
a lot of it just has to, fats and cutting down the sugars is really important. And I think that anybody who's listening to this who's a single parent or any parent, it's a really approachable, easy and more approachable book than an average book,
that I would write.
That you would write, because what you just said was like, huh? But I'm super excited to finish reading it because I did glimpse through a little bit of it, and I'm excited to try a challenge with my kids and my boyfriend's kids, because it sounds like easy recipes. And I've never been encouraged to cook, although everyone in my family, I'm Latin, cooks, but now I'm cooking a lot. I told you during COVID, I've been cooking a lot, and everyone is excited when I cook. So I feel like it's like positive reinforcement. So I do it more, and I'm excited to dabble on that and do the chickpeas and all that.
I hope you like them. I can't wait to hear.
I'll definitely give you feedback on that.
So let's do this. Why don't you and I both do a 7-day or 28-day challenge, and then we'll bring Emily back on and see how it goes.
Yeah, we should try to do that. That'd be fun.
So Emily, you've talked about you're back here. COVID brought you back to the States. You've got you're a single parent with 2 kids here. You're close to family. What's next for you now that the book is out? Any major plans? Is it the nationwide book tour, or back to Europe, or?
I'm trying to decide. Yeah, part of me wants to go back to England, because I really do like it there. But it's it's a dilemma of there, like, everything is just so easy for me in terms of living expenses and pace of life. And now that we're Italian citizens too, it's it'd be easy to be in Italy. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out, but I do love being near my parents. And I have friends still in the Bay Area where I'm from, and I don't know. Just enjoy it here for a while.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into the personal side of things, right? Because, we've talked about the book, but it wouldn't be a Single Parent Daily podcast without a little personal stuff. So, you obviously the trauma of losing a spouse, have you tried dating at all since, since that is, have you brought your kids in that, or, what are some of the things that you've experienced as being a single person now?
Hard. Yeah. I've had 2 relationships, both of which I've grown a lot from, and unfortunately neither of them seemed to be the right thing at the time. But they're both individuals that I really still care about, and it's been a good experience overall. But the highs and lows of that can definitely make parenting even more difficult.
Well, and we asked that because we talk.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and those are so many of the issues that we deal with on Single Parents Daily, is people trying to date after a divorce or after losing a spouse. It's like you bring kids into the mix, and then new people and blended families, and it's like it's a whole bag of kittens.
It's hard. Yeah, it's really tough. And in my case, since I met my late husband at 17, I really had not had any type of experience with this. So, yeah.
So what?
Yeah, you're like in a whole new world, especially with like being back in the States, single mom, and then COVID just probably isolated you, and you're like, what is going on right now?
Yeah, and it's not like you can Bumble or Tinder now.
You can't date now. It's like impossible.
Did you see Canada issued a medical release? It was a medical advice that says it's okay to have sex with a mask on. And like this came from the Canadian Health Authority. And I'm like, wait a second, if you're having sex with someone, I mean, is a mask really like what are you preventing at that point?
Yeah.
That was random.
We're all gonna plead the fifth. We're like,
like Evan, just shut up. Cinnamon. So yeah, so you're kind of just evaluating being, staying here, going back.
Trying to figure out what to do. Yeah, just that
take your time.
In your family versus being in a place that's more, sustainable. I think, being a single parent also, in my case at least, is like being the sole breadwinner, right? And that is a lot easier for me to do in a small market town in England than it is in California.
Yeah.
So, do you have family that gets to help you? Because I know for me, my family is very supportive, and so moving back around family was crucial in me making a decision. And not everybody has that. So I'm wondering, since you do have family and friends around, do you get that support as far as like them, like at least helping you with the kids, and so you can focus on work and so on?
Yes, my parents are amazing. I'm so fortunate to have them. Yeah, and ultimately also they just kind of want what I want, and so I was just talking to them about this dilemma, like, do we move back or what do they do? What do we do? And they just want to support us no matter. So.
Well, not that we have any say in the matter, Emily, but if you decide to move back to Italy, we'd be happy to do the next edition live.
Visiting you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Single Parents Daily on tour. Come.
Yes, exactly.
Europe.
I flew 160 something times last year and before COVID, and I'm so itching to get on a plane right now. Like I'd fly to Kansas City just to get on a plane.
You still can. You can travel.
I know, but anyway, that's a conversation for another time. So yes, so our vote here at the Single Parent Daily is that you go back and we'll come visit.
Perfect. I love it.
In the meantime, I'm definitely going to whip up some of these recipes and then tag you and share this book, because I know that for me, like, when I do get a sweet tooth, I'm guilty of, falling to the trap of the sugar-free syrups and the sugar-free stuff just to like replace that. And until now, recently, and anybody who's not familiar with nutrition and health and wellness, they would not know any better. And so I do want to share your book, and I want to try those recipes.
Absolutely.
That sounds exciting. I'm going to have guinea pigs. I'm like, hey, kids, look at this new recipe I tried. And document it.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is I'm all about making my kids, giving them things that they're actually can be useful at contributing, in the kitchen, not just making more mess for me. So a lot of these recipes are easy ones that kids can be helping with.
Did they help you with these recipes? Like saying, Mom, you should add a little more honey into that.
They have tested all of the recipes. Yeah, and actually the cutest thing probably that happened in this whole process was my now 8-year-old wrote me a review.
Wow.
You can see it on I took a picture and put it on our Instagram feed at Sugarproof Kids. And so he completely unprompted. I didn't even realize that he knew what a book review was. I guess he had heard me talking about it. So he wrote he said, I give it, 5 stars, Mommy. I've tried all the recipes and I love them all.
Nice.
Aww.
That was my best moment.
He's got to be the one that reads the ingredients. He's a smart one. He knows words of affirmation and that's your love language.
No more love languages. No more love languages.
That's so sweet. I'm going to follow Sugarproof Kids on Instagram.
Yeah, and we'll put all of your information in the show notes. Emily, it sounds like you really want to direct people to to the Sugarproof Kids Instagram. Yeah. The book is available on Amazon.
It is. Yes.
Okay. Wonderful.
It was really, really fun to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we just had the wonderful pleasure of talking to Dr. Emily.
We said it twice.
The book is Sugarproof Kids by Michael Gorman and Emily Ventura. We will put all this information in the show notes. Again, guys, look, things are tough here right now. COVID aside, being a single parent can always bring challenges when it comes to feeding yourself healthy, feeding your kids healthy. And in this book, I think are some real nuggets that you can take away as far as, what we need to do to make sure that our kids are resilient in their health department, in understanding what's best for them. And also some great tips on actually involving them in the cooking process, which are life skills that, some of us didn't learn until after college. Guilty. So Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Single Parents Daily with your hosts,
Chady Dunmore
and Evan DeMarco. Make sure to rate this one on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to us so you can get some updated information on whenever we drop one. And if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to us on there. Until next time, this is Chady and Evan.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.